Last month, an article appeared in the Montreal Gazette exposing the fact that meat from cloned animals was quietly slipped into Canada's food supply over the last decade. This is, of course, completely illegal, a direct violation of Health Canada laws against using meat from cloned animals as food products. Perhaps even more frightening than the unknown health risks Canadians have been exposed to by eating the cloned animals, however, is the fact that this happened without their knowledge or consent. In effect, Canadians were made guinea pigs in a vast, real-world experiment in food safety, and they didn't even know they were participating. Unfortunately, this reckless behavior, an egregious affront to basic scientific ethics showing a complete disregard for human safety, is by no means an isolated occurrence. The exact same process occurred in the 1990s, as genetically engineered crops were introduced into the food supply, with the general public completely unaware that they were eating GM foods. The few big agra and big pharma companies that have come to dominate this new field of food science, which they give the marketing-friendly name biotechnology, have made a concerted effort to keep consumers in the dark about just what it is they're eating. Last year, Dr. Neil Carman, an environmental scientist and advisor to the website SayNoToGMOs.org, spoke to the Corbett Report about the very real safety concerns associated with GM foods, and the fact that the big biotech companies are doing everything they can to stop consumers using free choice to determine what they will eat.
Well, I understand there are some significant scientific reasons for being concerned about food safety, and I think a lot of consumers are concerned about their food supply. So, what is the current status of GMO labeling in the U.S.?
There is no labeling. There's no labeling required by the FDA in the United States because the companies don't want it. And, of course, my argument is that if these foods, these genetically modified foods are so great, why not put the label on them so people can say, hey, I want to try that. But, you know, for some reason, it's kind of like putting a radioactive label on something that, you know, the biotech industry has said, well, we don't want that labeled. And so, why do they fear having these foods labeled? Is there some concern about, effects like allergies that might appear? I think they know that there's potential human health hazards associated with these novel foods, and as long as you don't label, there is no way you can trace any health effects back through the food system because there's no labeling. If you're eating some genetically engineered, crop ingredient in a food and it causes an allergic reaction, it's virtually impossible to prove that it might be due to genetic engineering of the crop because there's no traceability. In a label, if you try to contact the food store where you got it, they're not going to know. If you'd have to go back literally to the farmers growing it, and they may not necessarily know where all of their crops end up in the food supply. So there's a great deal of ignorance.
If these genetically engineered, hormone-treated, and cloned foods are so healthy, why are the big biotech companies going to such legal lengths to stop consumers from making an informed choice about these products? The truth is that public fears about eating foods that have been scientifically tampered with is not mere ignorance or hysteria. There are, in fact, numerous scientific concerns about the safety of these products.
The Flavor Saver tomato was the first genetically engineered food to reach the public. Calgene, the corporation that produced the tomato, had done 3 voluntary feeding studies on rats and found lesions in some of the rats' stomachs. Over the objections of several government scientists, the tomatoes were approved in May 1994.
We went on for years, couldn't figure out what our conception rate problem was. We worked with a veterinary, spent $1,000 here, $1,000 there. Nobody can figure out what was going on. And we just finally give up. For a few years, we were planting 100% BT corn. And you know, we didn't put two and two together till you start comparing the hog records when we were having conception rate problems and go back on the tickets when we bought seed corn, what years we bought 100% BT corn. And then it all kind of coincided, fell into spot.
The fact is, there has never been a single study on the human safety of these products. Any implications to the contrary is a pure fabrication. Make the corporate apologists produce a single study, and they cannot. The important point is this. Among scientists, the scientific community is deeply divided as to whether these foods are safe or not. So the burden of proof is on industry. And so far, the corporations have failed to demonstrate the safety of these foods on humans through a single study.
Now, a non-binding international code of food safety standards known as Codex Alimentarius is on the verge of becoming mandatory law for all WTO signatory countries. When Codex Alimentarius becomes law in all WTO member states in December 2009, the Codex Alimentarius Commission will be able to outlaw labeling of GM foods or approve cloned meat for human consumption by decree. There is no process for any individual country to appeal the Commission guidelines, and any country that fails to implement the Codex standards will be punished with crippling trade sanctions.
Let me give you a brief rundown of Codex then. After the Second World War, the Nuremberg tribunals were held, in which people who had committed crimes against humanity were judged by the world community in a court run by the United States and Britain, and they were sentenced to terms in prison if they were found guilty of crimes against humanity. One of the people found guilty of crimes against humanity was the president of a huge industrial megalith called I.G. Farben. Now, he's a sort of artistic fellow and creative. He was the one who was responsible for the slogan that people saw as they entered Auschwitz, usually for the last time. Arbeit macht frei. Work brings freedom. Creative sort of fellow. So he was sitting in jail and he said, well, that didn't work. What else can we do? I've got it. Food. He who controls food controls the world. So when he got out of jail, he went to his UN buddies and he said, have I got an idea for you? If we take over food worldwide, we have power worldwide. And his UN buddies said, cool idea. And so they created a trade commission. Codex has promulgated well over 4,000 guidelines, standards, and regulations on everything which can legally be put into your mouth, with the exception of pharmaceuticals. They are not part of Codex. Important.
Very few people would argue for a system where they are not allowed to know what they are eating. Yet just such a system is being set up right now as the big biotech companies spend billions lobbying furiously to stop consumers from making informed decisions about their food. The entire question, once it is boiled down, is a startlingly simple one. Do you want to know what you are eating?